That Saturday was one of those hollow ones, where the silence in the house seemed to have its own weight. I was drifting from room to room, tidying things that were already tidy, when I saw my son Leo's missed call on my phone. He'd left his expensive headphones at his friend Ethan's place after they were there the night before, and was trying to coordinate getting them back. It seemed like a minor inconvenience, something easily solved. I sent Ethan a quick text, letting him know I could swing by his apartment in Bellevue to pick them up for Leo. It was a short drive, a simple errand. Nothing complicated. I knew Ethan lived alone, a quiet young man who was always so polite. I hadn't given him much thought beyond his being a good friend to my son. He was handsome, I suppose, in a way you notice peripherally, like a pleasant piece of architecture. He was probably in his early 20s, but he had an old soul's kindness about him. To me, he was always just Leo's friend. That was the beginning and end of it, nothing more. So when I knocked on his door later that afternoon, I expected a quick, friendly exchange. But when he opened it, he was wearing only a towel knotted low on his hips, his dark hair damp and curling from a recent shower. He looked startled to see me, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, but not embarrassed. I didn't know where to let my eyes land, so I found myself staring at a point just over his shoulder, feeling a sudden, awkward heat rise in my own cheeks. The air in the hallway felt instantly thick, charged with an unspoken tension. "Hey, Ava," he said, a small, polite smile touching his lips. "I wasn't expecting you. Leo's out for a bit." He gestured vaguely. "What brings you by?" I fumbled with my words for a moment, my planned speech evaporating, before holding up Leo's headphones like a clumsy offering. "I just came to drop these off for him. I had no idea I'd be interrupting anything." He let out a soft chuckle and ran a hand through his wet hair, pushing a stray lock from his forehead. "Oh, you're not interrupting," he replied, his tone easy and unconcerned. "Just got out of the shower. Do you want to come in for a minute?" Son's best friend. At all. It was just me and him. Two people, sharing a moment of unguarded honesty. And the way he looked at me, with such focused attention, suggested he was genuinely interested in what I had to say. That's when something inside of me began to shift. I started to see him in a new light. There was so much more to him than simply being Leo's friend. Then he offered a gentle, almost knowing smile. "Ava, you seem like you've been through a lot," he said, his voice soft. "It's hard to imagine. I remember you and my mom talking at our high school graduation, like it was yesterday. I didn't know how to respond, so I just gave a small, appreciative nod. A new kind of energy was crackling between us, something unspoken, but undeniably there. I could feel it, a subtle spark, a quiet tension, and I wasn't sure what it meant. But I knew, with a sudden certainty, that I wasn't ready to leave yet. He stood up and went into his kitchen, and I found myself following him. As he moved past me, I caught the clean, fresh scent of his soap, a delicate and masculine aroma. And for a brief, dizzying moment, he no longer felt like Leo's friend. He was just a man, an individual with his own story and his own depth. "Thank you for stopping by," he said, turning to face me again. I think maybe I needed to talk to someone today too." I offered him a small smile in return, feeling a pleasant warmth spread through my chest. "Anytime," I said, and as I finally left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between us. Something unspoken had taken root, and I had no idea where it would lead. The next time I saw Ethan, it was completely by chance. I was out picking up a few things for dinner when we nearly collided in the pasta aisle of the grocery store. He was holding a jar of marinara sauce, studying the label with a thoughtful little frown creasing his brow. And for some reason, that simple image struck me. How had I never noticed how naturally handsome he was? Replied, "Do you need anything?" It was a simple question, but it blossomed into a full-blown conversation. We talked about food, the dreary Bellevue weather, and other inconsequential topics. But beneath the surface of our light banter, there was a thrum of something deeper. A subtle but palpable tension hummed between us, communicated through small glances and quiet smiles. Then, unexpectedly, he asked, "Are you doing anything tonight?" He said it so nonchalantly, as if the answer didn't much matter, but I could tell he was testing the waters. I wasn't sure how to respond. I shrugged, feigning indifference. "Not much, just a quiet night at home." He smiled faintly. "Leo is out with his friends tonight. I was thinking of making dinner. You should come over. It would be nice to have some company." The offer caught me completely by surprise. My immediate instinct was to politely decline. After all, besides Leo, what did we really have to talk about? But the earnestness in his voice made it impossible to say no. Before I could overthink it, I heard myself agreeing. Yes, sure. And that was that. I had no idea what I was walking into. But later that evening, as I drove back to his apartment, my stomach was in knots. There was a buzz in my chest I couldn't explain, a feeling like I was about to step into an entirely new and uncharted territory. When I arrived, his apartment felt as warm and inviting as I remembered. The rich aroma of something delicious cooking wafted through the air, filling the space with a warmth that felt almost too welcoming. Ethan was already in the kitchen, humming softly to himself as he stirred a pot on the stove. I stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching him. And that's when it hit me. The young man in front of me didn't feel like the Ethan I thought I knew. He looked the same, but there was something about him that felt more authentic, more open. "Go ahead and have a seat," he said over his shoulder. "Dinner is almost ready." I sat down at his small kitchen table, trying to appear relaxed. He moved around the kitchen with such effortless grace, as if he belonged there. Profound advice or deep insights. He simply nodded and let me speak. Even as I sat there, I noticed things about him. The way his eyes would light up when he became passionate about a topic, the genuine, unforced sound of his laughter. He wasn't just Leo's friend anymore. He was a person. He had his own thoughts, his own feelings, and his own life. "Thank you," he said, as we finished eating and I started to help clear the dishes. He smiled at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something deeper in his gaze. "I'm so glad you came over," he said. "It's been a long time since I had a real conversation with anyone." I didn't know what to say, so I just gave him a small nod, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. There was a shift between us now, something we didn't need to acknowledge out loud. When it was time for me to leave, he hugged me. It was simple, comfortable, and warm. But his hand lingered on my back for a second too long, and that single moment stayed with me. "Take care, Ava," he whispered, his voice barely audible. My head was spinning as I walked out to my car. The evening had seemed so ordinary on the surface, yet it had managed to unlatch something deep inside me. I couldn't describe it. He hadn't done anything overtly improper, but the way he looked at me, the way he listened, it made me feel like there was something real between us, a connection of a different kind. I had been to Leo's friends' houses 100 times, but this was not the same, and I hated how much I thought about it in the days that followed. I tried to push it out of my mind, to pretend that nothing had happened. A few days later, Leo called and asked if I wanted to join him and Ethan for a drink. I thought that getting out might help clear my head, but as soon as I walked into the bar, I saw Ethan sitting at a high-top table, waiting. He saw me, smiled, and gave a little wave. Without thinking, I waved back. His smile was relaxed, yet it held a warmth that hadn't been there before. That unspoken something made my stomach do a little flip. "Hey, Ava," he said as I approached. "I didn't expect to see you tonight." I felt it. That shift. That something his laughter or his glances elicited in me. Something I didn't fully understand. We both felt like we were holding a secret that neither of us dared to reveal. Then, at one point, Leo got up to get another round of drinks, leaving just the two of us at the table. I hadn't planned on saying anything, but the words just tumbled out. "So, Ethan, how have you actually been?" He paused. His smile faded slightly, and for a moment, I saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. "I'm okay," he said quietly. "I've been feeling a little lonely lately." His honesty caught me completely off guard. It was as if he had peeled back a layer, revealing someone I hadn't expected, someone who was not just a carefree young man. "Yes," I replied, nodding slowly. "I understand that. It's not always easy." He returned the quiet nod, and we sat in silence for a few moments. It wasn't awkward. It felt serene, comfortable. I wanted to say something more to console him, to lighten the burden he was carrying, but the words wouldn't come. So I just looked at him, wondering if he truly meant it, or if perhaps he was hinting at something deeper. Leo returned with our drinks, and the moment passed. But something inside me had shifted. That night, my perception of Ethan changed irrevocably. He no longer felt like just my son's friend. There was a different kind of light surrounding him now, a dangerous and alluring kind. Later, when we all decided to leave, I walked with Leo to the car, but my thoughts were fixated on that brief conversation with Ethan. What exactly did he mean by lonely? Was he just bored, or was he gently asking for something more? As soon as I got home, I collapsed onto my couch and replayed the entire night in my mind. That dinner, that confession, that look in his eyes. It was then that I realized this wasn't just some random night out. There was something else happening between us. Something unspoken and powerful. And whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was being drawn into it. The scariest part? I wasn't sure if I wanted to resist anymore. I called Leo and suggested we go to the park and shoot some baskets, just like old times. Maybe if I moved my body, I could quiet my mind. When I arrived at the court, Leo was already there, practicing his shot. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "It's about time. You're late," he teased, passing me the ball. I forced a smile and said I had to take care of something. We played hard for the next hour, joking, talking trash, and trying to outdo one another. But my mind wasn't in the game. I was somewhere else entirely, somewhere warm, soft, and deeply perplexing. After a while, we took a break, sitting on the edge of the court. "You think Ethan is doing okay?" Leo asked unexpectedly. He wiped the sweat from his brow and looked over at me. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He's just been distant lately," he said, his eyes scanning the pavement. "Not his usual self. I'm not sure if he's stressed or what, but something feels off. I think he's going through something." That hit me harder than I anticipated. I had always perceived Ethan as a steady, composed young man, never rattled or uncertain. But perhaps I was wrong. "I don't know," I said, keeping my voice carefully neutral. Have you talked to him about it? He shook his head. Not really. Every time I try, he brushes it off. I don't want to push him, but I can tell he's not fine. I wasn't sure what to say. A part of me wanted to come clean, to tell Leo about the connection I had felt, the transformation I had seen in both Ethan and myself. But I couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Maybe he just needs some space, I offered, trying to sound casual. Yeah, he mumbled. Maybe. But I could hear the doubt in his voice. He wasn't buying it. We finished our game and headed back to my house. My gut, however, remained tight the entire drive, as if I were heading towards something I couldn't stop. We walked in the front door, and there he was. Ethan was sitting on the couch, turned around, caught off guard. Yeah, okay. What's up? He stepped inside and gently closed the door behind him. The space between us shrank, and I felt my chest tighten as he approached. I just wanted to thank you for the other night, he said, not quite meeting my gaze. It meant a lot to me. I swallowed hard, his words hitting me with more force than I expected. Of course, I replied. You know I'm here if you ever need someone to talk to. He nodded slowly, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. We were suspended in a dense, heavy silence that buzzed with everything we weren't saying. Then, almost as if to change the subject, he said, Leo's a great kid. You know, he's been through his share of stuff, but he has a good heart. I nodded again, unsure where this was going. But his gaze stayed on me for an extra second. The same spark I had felt before was back. It hummed between us like a wire stretched too tight. Yeah, I replied softly. He really does. He smiled, but there was something else in that smile I couldn't quite decipher. I wondered if he was thinking the same thing I was, and for a fleeting second, I considered asking him. I almost asked what was happening here, but I didn't. I just stood there, caught in the silence with him, wondering where we were supposed to go from here. Finally, he broke the moment with a quiet, "Thank you again, Ava." "Any time," I responded, but a part of me knew I wasn't saying it in the same way anymore. A week passed since that conversation in the kitchen. It hadn't been spectacular or loud, but it stayed with me. Every time I saw Ethan after that, the air felt different, electrified. I couldn't tell if he felt it too, or if I was just projecting my own feelings onto him. Regardless, the atmosphere between us had shifted, and I couldn't shake it. Leo and I hung out as we normally would. He weren't touching, but the distance between us was barely there. The air felt heavier. The room felt smaller. "I've been thinking about our conversations lately," he began, his voice soft and cautious. "And I think I owe you an apology." I looked at him, caught off guard again. This was not where I expected this conversation to go. "I know I've been a bit distant," he explained, saying he'd been dealing with some things and didn't want to blame anyone else. I blinked, trying to read his face. "I mean, it's okay," I finally managed to say. "You don't have to apologize." He gave me a warm smile at that, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't entirely convinced. There was more he wasn't saying. "I appreciate that," he responded, "but I think I might have crossed a line with you." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been both dreading and, if I was being honest with myself, quietly hoping for. I had no idea where it would lead, but I couldn't stop myself from hearing him out. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice softening, becoming more cautious. Ethan took a deep breath and looked down at his hands, nervously tugging at the edge of his shirt. "I think you already know," he said gently. "There's been something between us, and I can't keep pretending it's not there." I froze. His words hit me squarely in the chest, harder than I had expected. Of course I had felt it, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel more real, more tangible, and infinitely more confusing. "I'm not trying to make things awkward, Ava," he said, his voice just above a whisper. I'm not sure how to handle this. But I can't keep pretending nothing is happening." I looked at him, my mind flying in a million different directions. Everything inside me was screaming that this was wrong, that I shouldn't be here, in this position. And yet, there I was. "I don't want it to be weird either," I said, trying to stay calm, to keep the whole situation from unraveling. "But I don't know what you want me to say." That, the line we had been so carefully dancing around, vanished. We said nothing else. There was nothing left to say. But the air had changed. We both felt the shift, the immense weight of what we had just acknowledged. Everything changed after that. It's been 1 year since that night. A year of us choosing to keep a secret. A year of balancing the performance of everyday life with the quiet, stolen moments we carved out for ourselves. In some ways, it feels like we've lived an entire lifetime in those brief, hidden intervals. We didn't talk much about what we were. What had begun the night he answered the door in a towel had never vanished. It had simply become a part of the fabric of our lives. It felt strangely natural. But it was also fragile. Something we held close and protected fiercely. We agreed on one thing from the start. Our happiness mattered. And that happiness was built on trust. A kind of trust that allowed us to share everything with each other while keeping it hidden from the rest of the world. We created our own little bubble, our own miniature world, where only we existed. But the guilt never truly left me. Every time I saw Leo, something would pinch at the back of my mind. Not because I thought he deserved to know, but because carrying a secret of this magnitude always leaves a mark. Nevertheless, I never second-guessed my choice. We had both made it, and no matter how chaotic or complicated things became, it always felt right. Ethan and I saw each other whenever we could, which wasn't often. We never pushed the boundaries. We kept everything discreet, quiet, and out of sight. The hardest part was the pretending. Leo would be over, smiling and oblivious, and we would have to keep our hands to ourselves, acting as if we were nothing more than his mother and his friend. But those small moments, the quick, meaningful glance across a room, the subtle smile that was just for me, the fleeting touch of his hand when no one was looking, they became our everything. Those were the things that held us together. When we were alone in my house, we would sometimes talk about what might happen. Yes, but it had become something I couldn't imagine giving up. Ethan sat next to me, looking as handsome as ever. But there was a softness to him now, an ease in his body, a serenity in his face. It had taken time, but we had learned to carry the weight of what we had. We had grown into our secret. I had found a strange peace in it. I had figured out how to make it feel like home. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" he asked quietly, his voice warm and low, breaking the comfortable silence. I smiled and leaned back, sinking into the cushions. "All the time," I said. "Honestly, I still can't believe we've made it this long." I looked over at him, my initial astonishment having transformed into something that felt a lot like gratitude. "It doesn't feel like a year." He let out a soft laugh and rested his head on my shoulder. "It doesn't, does it?" he murmured. "But at the same time, it feels like this has always been our reality, like this was meant to happen." I nodded slowly, brushing my hand against his. "Yeah, it's weird," I said. "But it's the good kind of weird. I never expected my life to look like this. But now that I'm here, I wouldn't change a thing." He tilted his head, meeting my gaze with that same look that always seemed to make the world stand still. He replied gently, "Me neither. Considering the circumstances, I think we've done remarkably well. I'm glad we kept it between us." His voice was firm, certain. "It's ours. It's just ours." And he was right. That was the most important part. It wasn't about anyone else. This was something we had built. Quietly, carefully, and together. "I'm happy," I replied softly, giving his hand a small squeeze. "We're happy. That's what matters." We didn't talk much after that. We didn't have to. We just sat there, side by side, enveloped in a silence that didn't need filling. The only sound was the quiet ticking of the clock on the wall. A year had passed. A whole year of hiding in plain sight. We had somehow made it work.